So my teacher, Jeff Mulderman, would go upstairs to the Sons of Italy and say, "Any of you guys want to come downstairs and fight some guys?" And these guys are, they got a couple of beers in them and they just got off at the steel mill. Yeah, I'll come down and fight a guy. Yeah.
Hello, welcome back to the FormABLE Podcast, where we talk about formable moments in martial arts and formable moments in the lives of martial artists. My name is Jamie Sparling of Affinity Martial Arts. Today I have Tom Furman from Tom Furman Fitness. Before we get going, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and hit the notification bell so that you can be aware of whenever we have new episodes. Today, Tom's coming in to talk to us. He is a lifelong martial artist as well as a fitness expert and highly recommended by one of our guests, Chuck John Greco. Hey, Tom, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Right on. Really appreciate you coming on the show. You have a lifetime of knowledge and a tremendous um, reputation in the fitness world, and really awesome to have you on the show today, so I appreciate it. One of the things that I wanted to start off and ask you a little bit about was what pulled you into the martial arts and fitness, and was it like a discipline? Were you looking for was it survival oriented curiosity, or was it something else? What brought you on your path?
I grew up in Western Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh, and if you follow the Ohio River down, the next area is called the Beaver Valley. A lot of steel mills and so forth there. All my mom's half of the family were coal miners. Dad's half of the family worked in mills in the Pittsburgh area, and they were all war veterans. There's 11. There's actually more. Actually, I found out, but there was 11 combat veterans. The older ones, World War II, obviously, and the younger one, there was a couple in Korea and one in Vietnam, my cousin Terry. And so that generation's gone. And I say that to people, isn't like, oh, it was great back then, it sucks now. It was just different. But the standard for manhood was a little bit different then. Now, if my dad had been a corporate vice president for something, life would have been a little bit different. College, going to college and getting a job. But the thought of men going to the office, they used to say, hey, when you get to the work and you're in the office, I'm like, who goes to the office? Guys go to mills. Guys go to coal mines. That's what I was familiar with. And so the standard of guys who grew up that way, it was a gift. They were in a mill or coal mine, and they say, hey, there's a war on. Oh, I'm going to join the military. And my dad joined the Marines and eventually was in 2nd Marine Division in the South Pacific and Battle of Tarawa and so forth. Ones were in a military theater in Europe near the Battle of the Bulge. I don't think they participated, but they were near the Battle of the Bulge. That was my Uncle Joe, my Uncle Dempsey, my Uncle Charlie. He was in the South Pacific with my father. I think was in the Army Air Corps. There was something at the time. But that was the standard for manhood. So everyone had been in street fights. Everyone had boxed. I think everyone had boxed. Everyone had been through warfare and so forth. And they came back and they wanted to raise families and have houses with white picket fences and so forth. But and they were rather calm. There were no crazy guys drinking scotch and smoking cigars and yelling at guys outside the window and threatening to fight. They were very calm people. But the standard for figuring out how to do things in manhood was very different. My early influences were like Bruce Lee and Green Hornet and Robert Conrad, who was a martial artist and a very good boxer, and my uncle who was in movies and so forth. You watch them do films, and the media at the time influences a lot, like cowboy movies, war movies. My dad would watch Combat with Vic Morrow and Rat Patrol and things like that. And that was constant. We didn't have money to do great things in summer. We went to the drive-in. So everything was big. And it has a tremendous, so I'd say more so those things than sports heroes for me, even though I watched boxing throughout my teens, Muhammad Ali, of course, and Joe Frazier and so forth. So there's this need to feel physically competent. I didn't grow up in a violent area. There are violent areas in the Pittsburgh area and so forth. But everybody it's a strong work ethic. So bullying happens no matter what. It wasn't like a terrible bullying thing where kids were selling drugs and chasing you home from school. That didn't exist, of course. But just the psychological premise of older kids bullying you and feeling physically competent is there. But the seeds were planted, and I watched Trendon's movie that made a big influence was You Only Live Twice, James Bond.
Yeah.
Oh, I've watched it tons of times. But the martial arts, Asia and so forth, was fascinating to me. And that's something I definitely wanted to do. So I think I wrestled before that in 72, 71 air and started like strength training then. And then what really wanted martial arts, there was limited martial arts in that area, not like today. Jiu-jitsu schools on the corner and taekwondo schools and so forth. There it was hard to find. It would be like in fire halls, VFWs and things like that, and YMCAs and so forth. And so there was, in the Beaver Valley area where I studied martial arts, the biggest martial art was Dutch Indonesian, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah, it was the Wetzel family. If you're any historian in Indonesian martial arts, the Dutch Indos were the Wetzel family. So a lot of people were offshoots of the Wetzels. They had maybe military judo, a little bit of karate, and they had exposure to Dutch Indonesian. They call it Pukulan Chimande.
Yes, sir.
At the time. And my observations looking back, and I have a pretty good memory about these things, he threw in a lot of judo. Willie Wetzel was the hierarchy of the family, and his son Roy Wetzel was a Vietnam veteran, and Roy later took it over. In fact, they fought to the death once. That's in the newspapers. They got an argument over tax, and they fought to the death. It's true. Yeah.
Old school.
It was like 1973, I believe. Yeah, 73 or 74. And with samurai swords and nunchucks. I'm not kidding you. This happened. They had an argument. Yeah. And
Wow.
Roy choked Willie Wetzel, his father, out with a nunchuck. And he got off. He was defending himself.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, this is pretty famous. So you had them there. In north, if you go to Erie, all the way up to Lake Erie, which is a good ride. It's about 120 miles. You had William Reeders, who taught Kun Tao. Why he settled there, I have no idea. But there was a group of William Reeder's students from that area and teaching Kun Tao, in fact, actively. There's one on the west coast of Florida now teaching actively. And then if you went west, you went to Kent, Ohio, Kent State, as we know, the tragedy when the kids got shot during a war protest. You had Dr. Mongi of Bondo. So that area, you had Silat, you had Kun Tao, and you had Bondo.
That's
in the middle of nowhere. In the middle of nowhere. Now, was there Young Brothers Taekwondo? Yeah. In Pittsburgh, there was Glenn Premru, who was very famous early on doing Okinawan karate. They actually had a samurai act where they'd fight with swords and they'd demonstrate in that way. Glenn Premru, that's something we could probably look up. I don't even know if it's on the internet. And there was probably some at YMCAs and judo programs and so forth. So I started going down to the Wetzel School, and they said, well, we already started our 16-week program. I can't do it. Then I found another ad in a local magazine of combat. So I trained with several people there, and it was a mixture of Chinese Kung Fu, judo, and Dutch Indonesian martial arts. And it was just before Safety Punch came in, if you remember Safety Punch. It was Foam Gear Jun Rhee invented in Washington, D.C. The original inventor was actually Mike Stone. And they did tournaments, bare knuckle, and they weren't fighting out bare knuckle. You guys would get bloody and get split lips and broken noses, but you were supposed to pull your punches, but they'd hit to the body. And Jun Rhee came up with foam gear. So guys, when I first fighting with, they were doggy paddling coming in, they're just swinging at each other. So we bought some. Not like we had any money. We'd buy some, we'd start fighting with that. And they had safety face. They had headgear made out of foam. And so we started using that. So we started using what were called Built-Tough gloves. And they were used by interior linemen. They just covered your hand like bag gloves, but your fingers stuck out. So we could trap. So we used that. We used safety face and wore sneakers and got in boxing ring. And one of the first gyms I was in we trained at a boxing gym, Rochester Boxing Club in Rochester, Pennsylvania. So we trained there. We'd get in a ring and fight. And sometimes the boxers would stay. A lot of times it was just us. And with a lot of injuries, a hospital was across the street. Dislocated fingers, cuts. I've been treated for human bite. You cut it, no mouthpieces, cut it open on a guy's mouth. Worst bite you're going to get is a human bite. So you go across the street and get it sewn up and get a tetanus shot. I've had enough of those in my life. And So that's how we started fighting. We'd do throws and stuff. No ground combat. I wrestled, but like you use an outside sweep or something like that if you engaged, and threw the guy down. And if we were, one funny thing we did is we're getting used to fighting each other. Upstairs was the Sons of Italy. So my teacher, Jeff Mulderman, would go upstairs to the Sons of Italy and say, any of you guys want to come downstairs and fight some guys? And these guys are, they got a couple of beers in them and they just got off at the steel mill. Yeah, I'll come down and fight a guy. Yeah. Yeah. So and now you're 17. You're athletically there. Your endurance is good. You're skipping rope. You're hitting heavy bag. You're a tough guy. But mentally, these guys come down. Okay, kid, I'm going to kick your ass. They got beards and stuff. We got like 2 hairs coming out. They got beards and they got some beer in them. They got, they think they're tough. And you're pumping. Your heart's pumping. I'm going to get my butt kicked here. But you get in there and you use footwork. You use a jab. You use some kicks. About a minute and a half in, they're out of breath. I don't care if they're 25, 35, 45. They're not training. They're drinking beer. They're doing work resting. We know how physiology works. So you just found out they're good for a couple punches, swinging at you and even missing. They're going to get out of breath. You ever watch I watched Tough Man contests in early 80s. And like 3 punches in, the guys are completely out of breath. They won fights in bars by sucker punching.
Yep.
Or picking on someone smaller. And then they hit them and they go, oh, they're a tough guy. Then they get in a ring and we know the difference between a trained fighter and someone who says he can fight and it's going to go red and bodies are going to drop and all that stuff. So that was some interesting experiences we had. And that's how we started. And then we studied everything. We got James Jim Lee's Wing Chun Kung Fu, written by Bruce Lee, which I think every human on earth has that book. But that was our introduction to Wing Chun. And there was a beauty to it. And then there was like, well, you're really not learning Wing Chun. You're not learning these beautiful positions like, say, Francis Fong would do, who's like, I consider way up here. He's just beautiful as an expression of Wing Chun. But you're seeing Ted Wong and James Jim Lee kind of use boxing. Okay, here comes a jab. He slips a jab, boom, boom, boom. And it was like, wow, it's kind of set up smart here to real fighting. So that was our whole guide for Wing Chun. So then we go, okay, they did this. Okay, put on the helmets, put on the gloves. Let's go and try it out. So that was our test constantly, pressure testing, as we call it nowadays, of seeing if this stuff worked. Or if you got in a fight at school, nowadays you're going to be sued and you're going to be thrown out of school. In those days, they just, hey, break it up. And that was the end of it. A couple football coaches came and dragged you away or something like that. Different world now. And so that was our measure of it. And so at one point, my teacher, he bought some shinai, Japanese shinai, said, hey, why don't we fight with these? Long before the Dog Brothers. This is I moved down here in 79. So this is like 77. Hey, let's fight with these. So put on helmets. We put on hockey gloves. Went out to a park, Brush Creek Park, and say, okay, I set the timer. Let's go. Start beating the crap out of each other. Okay, this works. Boom. Kind of a roof block. Oh, okay, that kind of works. Kind of work block like this. Boom. The only thing that was really difficult was you got to thrust with a sword. Even though it's bamboo, you get beat up, you get bruised. It's not a big deal. You take a thrust to the body, like your solar plexus. Okay, that's it. Get down on one knee. Okay, I got it. And that was our experimentation with that. And the first book out was Rami Presas on modern Arnis.
Yes,
I think it was like a purple book, I believe. So where are you going to get, like broomsticks, they break. You're not going to get rattan. So we get branches off of trees and put them in ovens. Mom loved that. And you bake them. Yeah, you baked them and then would fight with those and train with those. And just rudimentary level. Enough like if someone swung a tire iron at you or picked up a stick, you'd have some sense of closing the distance. And what it taught me early on was like, when it's a weapon, you have to close in much deeper. Like if you're defending yourself, like it's like, wow, we're really leaping in. What Joe Louis and Bruce Lee used to call bridging the gap. You really have to bridge the gap in deep. So you started thinking this. So there was a tool of that. Like if you think you know something, oh, here's 5 angles. Then when I trained later, and Santa was teaching, it was like calculus. Like, oh my God, look at these guys. And it's a teaching methodology. When you watch the Dog Brothers fight, does it come out? Yes. But does it come out like calculus? No. It comes out more like arithmetic.
Yeah.
which is fine, by the way. But that was the difference. And so that was our early pressure testing. When I got down to Florida, well, what happened is my instructor left for Florida. He said, I was working in a machine shop and he was working in a mill. And he said, we could starve in the cold or we could starve in the tropics. What do you want? So he moved down here like maybe a year, maybe 9 months. And he says, I can get you a job. We were working at one factory down here. And he had tried a bunch of odd jobs. And I said, okay, you stay at the house and we'll all protect one another. We'll all pitch in on food and everything. So I was like 20, 21. So I told my parents, listen, it was the Jimmy Carter era, and we had like kind of a depression for work. I couldn't find work in the Pittsburgh area. And I said, I'm going to go to Florida. Jeff's down there. And they said, oh, okay. We know Jeff well. It's like family. So I got a sleeping bag and a suitcase and $200 in my pocket and left. And I've been down here since 1979.
Fascinating.
And, yeah. So that's how that part of the adventure began. I'll tell you one more thing about Western Pennsylvania. The beautiful part of it is wrestling, amateur wrestling's huge. Mm-hmm. It's huge. Then in Pittsburgh, professional wrestling was huge. Bruno Sammartino lived there. He promoted all those matches.
Really?
He brought in Baron Cicluna. You'd see him in a mall, Baron Nagel Cicluna and all these people. Professor Tor Tanaka, who was a legit martial artist and boxer. You'd see these guys, go to wrestling matches at the Civic Arena, or they'd show up at high schools and they'd show up with VFWs and all over the place. You'd see them around town. And you'd watch it, and some of them were legit decent wrestlers.
Absolutely.
But they're doing kayfabe or professional wrestling acting type of, with shtick. I watched that every Saturday most of my life when I was a kid. And so the influence of grappling was there. Was it like jiu-jitsu now? No. There was Japanese jiu-jitsu, of course, at that time. There was amateur wrestling at that time. And you'd see a square off where one guy's going to punch one guy double legs him, takes him down, starts ground and pound. Very unsophisticated. But you saw that occurring. Did you always think it was the best strategy? Not always. Not like it is now where you take them down, you can get them in a choke really fast or something like that. But those guys existed. And so you had a broad awareness of combat. And I'd say that's strongly influenced by people appreciating combat, like hockey or like football in the Pittsburgh area of guys working blue-collar jobs and being war veterans. That whole mindset existed then. It probably wouldn't exist in a highly educational Harvard University. It existed in Pittsburgh. It existed in other places too. You can go to like a town with a port like Boston or something like this, or Long Beach or something like that. That occurs. But I'm just saying, in my personal experience, that's one thing, was a fertile ground for combat, and unusual too. So
what I heard there quite a bit is, I kept thinking of, with the books and the limited information, right? What someone might have been doing in the 90s was like reverse engineering some of those things with limited information, and you had an opportunity to actually do the engineering beforehand.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because I remember I was sparring some kid. God, this is years ago. I was sparring some kid, and we're like trying to sweep each other's legs. Can you sweep the guy, drop the guy? It would shock him, and it loses his mojo a bit. So instead of kicking the back of the leg and letting him drop, and we're very bladed stances, Sancho Dachi, or horse stance or whatever. And we were going shin bone to shin bone. And I remember a teacher, his name is Ron Sikosi, owned an air conditioning business. It was a teacher teaching us. He goes, "You're going shin bone to shin bone," and we're just going. We're not ties. We're like 16-year-olds. And then finally, you get in close enough, and I remember slipping in and getting him across the chest and doing outside sweep osotogari or whatever, and him going down. I felt so good. And like 3 days, my shin's swollen, all for that one throw. And so then you watch better people, but there's, you're driving miles. It's not like here, judo around the corner, jiu-jitsu, there's a jiu-jitsu school here, there's a tent planted up the street. It didn't exist. You had to drive miles to go someplace, and a lot of times in the winter.
Yeah.
And it was fun. It was adventurous. So sometimes people didn't see it was, they built false dichotomies. Is the wrestler better than the boxer? That was the old one. Gene LaBelle. Okay, go back to Gene LaBelle's days. Or is karate better than judo? Or is kung fu better than taekwondo? And they're false dichotomies. They're both punching and kicking. Or is this street fighter? I'm like, oh, well, give me a list of the street fighter techniques. It's going to be bad boxing. Maybe it will be some foul techniques like biting or ripping or tackling maybe. That's kind of living in a fantasy world. People set up false dichotomies. They do it with food. They do it with exercise. And to a degree, when you hear it now, like I like to watch UFC. I watch almost every week it's on. And they'll say, well, I like the old days. And I'm like, I don't. The athletes didn't get paid well. They could have permanent injury, would change their life. They've got to support their children. And there's no record. The guy had 2 fights and quit. Got kind of a name at the time because there was nobody doing it. But they're not looking out for their health or long-term or developmental process where they have coaches, boxing coaches, grappling coaches, and so forth. And it's kind of a like a video game mentality. It's 14-year-old thinking. It's childish thinking. So, and I've had it. I'm going to be this Friday. I'm going to be 69. Okay. So it gets around. I don't talk about martial arts only to martial arts guys.
Yeah.
And because people just aren't. It's not their field. They might be good at medicine or selling houses or selling cars. And so you do martial arts. So when do you do? Do you do this? Do you do that? Well, I've done this, I've done that. I say, yeah. Oh, do you do MMA? I'm like, I'm 69 years old. Like, what are you talking about? And it's just all they know. They see it on TV. They hear you speaking, and they just relate to that. Or so, well, my friend does that. Oh, good. And whatever. So, well, where's his record? I'll look it up on Wikipedia. Okay, I want to see what his record is. And I was looking at Jean-Yves Thierry's record last night from 80s kickboxing, and he fought this guy. And okay, and my point being is people's impression of martial arts is very different than it used to be. It used to be mystical and magical. Guy Box have 30 fights. He's a pretty rough guy. Mm-hmm. He's going to run into very few things he's not going to handle. Maybe he's not good with handguns. Maybe he's not good at breaking tie wraps around his waist. Maybe he has no tactical background. Maybe he's not going to be good in a wrestling situation. But I'd say 90%, if it's 30 fights, this is not and he's going to avoid violence. Mm-hmm. You and I see, oh, look, there's like 2 guys who are shaking each other down for cash or drugs. We're going to walk the other way. But people say, oh, didn't you run in there with your chest out? And, no, don't do that. No, I ran the other way. And the point being is people had the wrong impression, and years ago was very magical. Could this beat this? Could this beat this? That was the whole game. That was a point of the UFC. It was very staged in that manner. We're going to do jiu-jitsu, and we're going to show it's the best. Well, let's just get a bunch of guys that can only fight standing up. Okay, let's not ship some guys from Dagestan over. Could have been a long night. Yep. Okay, and they were doing the same thing then. It would have been a long night. So they used the myth a little bit and draw attention, Jorge and Gracie and other people. And effectively, very good at marketing. But my point is, it's a sport. There's a mixed martial arts sport, which is good. And there's mixed martial arts, like Filipino martial arts are mixed martial arts.
Yes, sir.
Okinawan arts, each village had a different art. So when guys came over, they had trained in several arts. In Okinawa, came to Japan, and you got different arts. The 4 major arts were Kyoku Shinkai, Shotokan, Shito-ryu, and Wado-ryu, I think. Those are the 4 major styles in Japan at one point. So, and they all look pretty close, and everybody, if it's a big guy, maybe he's a power puncher. If he's a guy who could do splits, he's a kicker. If he's a guy who knows more wrist locks and stuff, he had more wrist locks. Then he changes the name. Then, he teaches a Korean that takes it back and it becomes Hapkido. We know how that works. And it's all very interesting to me. I think they call it hopology, the study of combat. I could be wrong. But I've always been fascinated by it. And it's always going to be an expression of who you are to a degree. You watch the fighters in UFC. You can watch a whole stand-up fight for 5 rounds. Never goes to the ground. Watch another one, goes to the ground constantly. You watch the ground when a guy gets hit hard, it goes to the ground. Or the guy times it starts using the jab, guys reacting to the jab, changes levels, goes for a takedown. Real smart. That's the smartest way to do it. But it's not like was back when the Gracies were starting things and the wrestlers were coming in. And what was the difference? The wrestlers, other than a topside mount, they were strong, full of really juiced up really well. Mark Coleman and so forth were heavily juiced and fine. It was in the rules. So I think it's so much better now. They're tested, hopefully tested, but medically they're taken care of. They get a scratch, they go out, a scratched eyeball or something like that. Something's broken. There are people there. If they get knocked out, they're not just dragged out, put on a stretcher. They've got teams there. I think it's a much better thing to watch now. I enjoy it much more with different weight classes. It's great when a lightweight beats a heavyweight like Benny Urquidez or something like that. But the chances for the heavyweight killing the lightweight through sheer mass is there too. Now, who's going to deal with the family?
Yeah.
But people like the spectacle. It's like gladiators. This guy beat this guy. Well, what happened to him? Okay, he didn't work after that. He moved in with his parents. How'd that work? Going to go talk to the parents for me? Like as I say, it's an immature viewpoint for a lot of people outside of the martial arts world. And people in martial arts, it's a lot of hard work and not a lot of payback either. It's personal expression. If you're successful in school, it's a really good thing. If you're teaching in your backyard, 5 buddies, that's a fantastic thing. And there's a lot in between, but you see schools close. How many? You see strip malls close, or we're moving the whole operation over. And I've seen good instructors. So I consider good instructors. They have a building that all of a sudden they're in a LA Fitness. They're allowed to rent a room and sign off on liability and be in LA Fitness. Oh, we're moving to LA Fitness. Okay, that's fine. They're teaching. They're having fun. It's a tough business. Who wants learn to fight? Other than babysitting, picking up the kids in vans, having the instructor's wife tutor them, and then getting the kids occupied, discipline, exercise, all those things. That's a big source of income, I would say. Nothing wrong with it. I think it's a good thing. After school care, I think that's a very super positive thing. I think better the kids are doing that. But to keep adults in martial arts, jiu-jitsu's had a pretty good business model coming from Brazil. And like Horion starting off was a lawyer. And I think a lot of the guys knew what the business was like and came here and instituted the same thing. I think they're doing better business-wise, but like you're going to start Joe Shotokan school in the corner. It's going to be a tough run. You better be good at marketing. You better be good at social media. You're going to have an after-school program. You're going to have to buy some vans. You're going to have external advertising, online advertising. You're going to be insured. Because the old days you came home, I came in black eye. Hey, you got a black eye. Now they'd sue you. Oh, we got a waiver. Oh, we'll find a lawyer.
Yeah.
Okay. So you know more about it than I do, but that's the way I view looking outside, never having owned a school. So.
Sure. Well, and then what I heard there was a little bit about like the old school. It was a martial fantasy, and then how it kind of grew, and it was mystical, and it was if a guy threw a kick, you were like, oh my gosh, he knows something, and he might have just watched a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, but at the same time you handled it different.
It was. I remember like we were little kids, we just used to wrestle. Like you fight and you wrestle. It was kind of like an agreement fight. An agreement. We're not going to kill each other. And then like you got a little older, then someone threw a punch. They go, whoa, it's getting this. Now we've elevated a level.
Yep.
And I think it was Mike Stone who said like the first time someone threw a kick, that's a dirty fight. He threw a kick. And there's a Shotokan guy I read years ago. This is how old I am. Ray Doughty, and he was JKA Shotokan. And he grew up in Canada where they did like club fights, his dad and him. And he said, well, I'm a like skinny middleweight. It's the Sonny Liston. Like, what am I going to do? So then he saw karate. He saw a front kick. He goes, oh, I got a front kick. Whoa, that's a game changer. He just saw that because he's thinking, put him out with my hands. What am I going to do against Sonny Liston? I'm going to get killed. But then he saw that's a game changer. And I don't know if he's still alive, but very prolific for that mentality of coming. That's the mentality you want in an instructor. He's gone through this hardcore stuff. He sees the increased technology of a front kick,
yes,
or side kick, or for whatever he's going to use, and says, okay, I'm building on this base, but I want this base. He's not just saying learn a front kick. You throw a front kick and hit something and you fall over, which can happen. That's the difference. Is you want someone who doesn't spend a lot of time in fantasy. And there's I see it even now, really good instructors. They, rather than teach their material, we spoke a bit on this on the phone, is they spend time trashing other martial arts to this day. Like a guy wants to teach traditional Samoan martial arts, Lima Lama, traditional Samoan martial arts. Okay, do those guys spar? Okay. Do they wrestle a bit? Yeah, okay. It's not great, but they're getting down there. They do straight self-defense, like you're getting choked, you're sitting in a chair, and a guy grabs you. Yeah, okay, they got that. They put on gloves occasionally. Yeah, mouthpieces, good. Okay, that's good. That's fine. You don't have to say, oh, look at the way they train. And there's a lot of that going around with that community. Is they'll get on YouTube or they'll get on Instagram and they'll stand in front of you and tell you, oh, look at this Filipino guy doing guntines. We know this doesn't work. And look at this guy over here doing the dance of death. He doesn't work. And I'm like, okay, you just wasted 4 minutes of my time. I wanted you to do something like you're going to show a Imanari roll, which but you could have taught that and say, oh, I like your teaching. I'm going to download your DVDs or your videos, and I'm going to go to your school when I'm in your town. No, you spend a bunch of time telling me how someone else sucked. So, and I said this, there's a German word. I don't even know if I pronounce it right, but it's my victory or my success isn't as important as your failure. So rather than succeed and help others succeed, which is, I think, human, I want to succeed, but I want to see everybody else fail. And it goes through all right, but it's huge in martial arts. It's huge. And there are some people who don't even think about it. They just go out and teach, And there's others that watch a video. And they're nice guys. I talk to them like, what are you doing? And that's their whole shtick. They run videos in the background, like the McDojo or the strip mall stuff in the background. And I'm like, there's always going to be kooks. There's kooks selling cars.
Yes.
There's guys who are like terrible insurance salesmen. There are, you go to any job site, you go to an office, there's going to be somebody there selling drugs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not heavy stuff. They're not doing heroin deals, but they're like, who do you talk to?
There's something
over there.
Yep.
Yeah, there's something going on. You know what I'm talking about? There's always going to be scumbags around, and there's always going to be some guy putting his hands out, and guys are flying away from them. Why do you have to watch the videotape 60 times? What you do is laugh once, it's over with, get back to work. But they seem to feel the need to diminish others to prop themselves up, and I think that's just a bad part of teaching. I think it's a really bad. People who I've really followed in martial arts and pulled in their stuff, their training material, never ever did that. Never did that. And I can name those names. I mean, like Ray Floro down in Australia, who I think is a phenomenal instructor, great guy. And I've used his materials, spoken to him. I used to come home from work after doing a show, 1 a.m. It was like 4 over in Australia, and would be texting back and forth on the computers and things like this. And Dan DeSanto and Richard Bastillo and Larry Hartzell and Tim Tackett, and go down the line. It never happened. Never happened. Bastillo goes, okay, get your boxing gloves. Let's go. Get the focus mitts. Let's go. Okay, everybody down on the ground. Okay, get the guy in the choke. Let's go. This then someone rolls in and says, oh, we pressure test stuff. He was pressure testing this stuff in the 1960s in Hawaii. And his dad worked construction. They were not construction camps, but they were in neighborhoods built around the construction. Richard Bastillo, that's where he grew up. So when he's pressure tested, they're like, where'd you learn that throw? I said, is that what you've been training with the Machados? He goes, no, I learned this in judo class in like 1958. Larry Hartzell did that to me. He was showing I was posturing up versus a triangle. We were doing something. He goes, go ahead and posture up. Now he's making it hard on me, right? Because here's the counter to him posturing up. He showed me a counter. I go, well, you've been rolling with Gokor, the Armenian instructor in Hollywood. Gokor Sheveshian, I think it is. They had a big group of fighters. And he said, no, Tom, that was 1961 judo class. That's where he got it from. I remember he said to me down in Miami, you were right off A Street. He said, that was judo class 1961. And so I'm like, well, he was doing that then. So he understands how it works. He knows the real deal. And it's hard to find people because usually they're pieced up pretty good with injuries, or they're in jail, or they're simply retired because they don't want to be around that type of thing. There's some military guys that could tell you colorful stories about the fun stuff, but they avoid the really scary stuff because they don't want to relive it. And if they're telling you it, it probably isn't true. But having been around a number of these guys who tell you like have been through the scary stuff, they kind of bounce around a little. They'll tell you one thing or another, but they don't dwell on it, is what I'm saying. And those days are over. It's like if you lived out of a pack in the military for a couple of years, and then you're like married with kids, and someone goes, "Why didn't you go camping?" I remember a guy saying this. He goes, "Yeah, I've camped enough."
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, why don't we go? Why don't we jump out of an airplane? I jumped out of enough airplanes.
Why don't you go jump out of an airplane?
Yeah, you go. That's a good experience. You ever jump out of an airplane? Yeah, I have. You don't know the guy's background. Those are the guys I tend to like being around. Like, well, okay, it's a good thing. Good for you. It's a good experience, but I don't need to do it anymore. And we go back to fighting. Do you need to go out on the mat to prove you're a tough guy? So I did those days. Those days are gone. I can worry about my health now, my fitness, security of my family. The doors are locked. The alarm system's on. That's 99% of it anyways. No one's coming into John Wick's house. So
No. And one thing that you speak quite often about, and you touched on it there, is longevity in training, right? What do you think is the difference, or what separates people who can train for decades versus somebody who gets burnt out or burnt out? Yeah.
No, that's easy. Well, I mean, some people start things and they get very enthusiastic and they get this whole wow, they like the rush. I was watching, what was it, the Rookie, the TV show, and the lead character, his wife, was like that, and she's a tough chick. She's a fireman and she does capoeira and can handle guns and stuff. And then someone offers her a job to go to the Pentagon to leave Los Angeles and uproot their life. And they say, well, you can get a law enforcement out there. And you're like, you're 51 because it's the Rookie. You started at like 48 or whatever. And no, you're not. You're not going to be starting over. And she was the type, they had a discussion and she said, you need that buzz, like that starting something new and you're all pumped up. Let's start a new business. Let's go on a different vacation this year. Let's try something else this year. So some people burn out because of that. They need that constant rush of doing something new groups of people, new activities. And they could push not the cutting edge, but the bloody edge, and they'll get injured. I'll say, I was playing baseball, not even softball. I started playing baseball with this, older league. What happened? Well, I was pitching. Oh, yeah, I used to pitch when I was a kid. What happened? Well, my rotator cuff blew. Well, what do you think? One, you're older, you haven't trained in years, and you're trying to throw a 100-mile-an-hour fastball. So now you have a story now, okay? And they can't play tennis, and they can't throw too well either now. So they're burned out. And in martial arts, you can watch TV and movies and decide you want that. You don't realize the hard work involved. The reason Keanu Reeves limps is movies. And Chad Stahelski, and we know Chad from martial arts long before he directed. And Chad didn't go to shoot wrestling because he hurt his knee. So he let the knee heal and got into stunt work. And it was stunt work for Keanu. And that's where the history started, is injuries that Keanu had over the years, doing stunt. Well, okay, this is an action piece. I'll do this, you do that. Okay. So he get hurt. And I think he had a motorcycle accident. So his ankle's screwed up. And you see him limp when he tries to run or walk, Keanu. And doesn't complain about it. He doesn't complain about it. So these things, when you're enthusiastic and you're doing movies, there's a lot of pressure. Like the injury's worth it. It's on film forever. John Milius, I think it was John Milius said that to Arnold Schwarzenegger when he made Conan. Like, oh yeah, I got hurt doing that. And, yeah, but it's on film forever. And it's the same thing with martial arts. You watch the movie like that, and you say, well, Keanu can do it. He's older than me. I'll do it. And you haven't been doing action movie work, not calling quite stunts, like I'd say what Tom Cruise does is stunts, but action movie work. You haven't been doing that for years. training with this expert for so long, doing it under controlled circumstances and having a gradual saying, okay, that's too risky to do. Insurance is not going to allow me. You haven't been doing that. So your fantasy is built, it's a real fantasy. So people get started. The same thing with skiing, same thing with motorcycling, same thing with tennis. Oh, tennis looks like fun. Now they've got pickleball, right? Pickleball?
Yeah.
Pickleball. And everybody, I'm single, so you see women, oh, do you play pickleball? And my answer is, well, no, I'm straight. So yeah, it's designed for people who can't play tennis. I mean, they can play tennis, but tennis is a harder, more dynamic game. I trained a tennis player who went to Wimbledon. Okay, not in tennis, but in conditioning. Mm-hmm. I understand. I've seen them train. I've seen what type of athlete they are. Most people walking the earth will never be this athlete. That was in the gene pool, and they trained hard. Okay, and they continue to train hard. So they see them playing tennis, or we could use martial arts, or even pickleball, and they go, oh, I want to do that. But then they start something very physically active, and they go at it, as we say, balls to the wall. And if you approach things balls to the wall, as my friend Jack Reap says, pretty soon it's raisins to the wall. Same with training, same with anything. Like going to Thailand. You want to go to Thailand and train on their Thai instructor. Okay, there's probably moderate classes for people visiting. But you say, no, I'm going to have a fight. Really? Okay. And I can't remember, the name is escaping me now, but he just fought Pereira. His wife's a model. And he went to Thailand to train kickboxing. Mm-hmm. And he was on Rogan's show. And I saw the clip. And he said, I got there. And he said, well, I figured we'd do some pad work this afternoon. Do some pad work and get a guy to work with me and, work my game. He said, well, we're going for a run. Oh, did you run this morning? I said, yeah, we're going to run this afternoon. Going to run twice a day. He goes, well, you're going to come with the team. Because you have no choice, you're on the team. He said, well, I don't have running shoes. I got flip-flops. I don't care. So he ran 4 miles in flip-flops. That's, you know what I'm talking about with Thai.
Yes, sir.
You know what I'm talking about. Anyone who's trained Thai boxing knows that's the absolute truth. For him, that's okay. He's a professional fighter. I think he's 31, 32 years old. Professional fighter, very good. And the average person says, oh, I want to do this. They're just not up to it. So they burn out rather rapidly. And the summary of this is something my late friend Steve Cotter was one of the early kettlebell pioneers. He and I were speaking once, and he did Chinese martial arts very young. A single mother, so they just dropped the kids off at Chinese martial arts school, daycare. And he's a genetic freak, physically speaking. Not a real tall guy, but like very muscular and very shallow shoulder and hip joints. So he could do like side splits and rotate his shoulders very easily, but very muscled to protect that. And it would say, I'll do one-legged squats, pistols. Okay, I can do 5. How many do you do? I can do 7. Really? So he started going to they do like 100. That's the mentality he always had. Like closing and opening your hand, they called them butterflies. Mm-hmm. And we were sitting around, well, yeah, we did butterflies. Oh, you call them butterflies. Like, what was your number? 1,000. Did 1,000. That was his mentality. And he said, you're a martial artist all of your life, but you're a martial athlete only part of your life. Yeah. That was one statement was very clear. And I said, that's a good point. Like, and that gets back to, oh, do you do MMA? No, I'm 60 or 70 or whatever the age is. It's a stupid question. They ask it because it has an ego thing. They don't do it, so they're trying to find a weak point somehow. The other thing was Dan Inosanto, and I had this repeated to me by Larry Hartzell. Dan Inosanto said, every 5 years, you should look at your training and adjust it.
Yeah.
So I was 30, and I'm thinking, how dare him say that? I'm never going to get old. And I was thinking about it, and at the time, I think he was 50. He was 50, 51, something like that. I was 50. And he was still training really hard. And I thought about it, and then Larry Hartzell said it. And Larry Hartzell had his share of injuries. He was an MP in Vietnam. He did wrestling. He did judo. I think he hurt his hip racing cars. And then when he moved back to North Carolina, he went to school in California, went to North Carolina, was a deputy sheriff. He was bouncing at night. And we're talking North Carolina bouncing. Not that it isn't bad anywhere else, but like
good old boys.
22 Magnum shot, knife wounds in the shoulder, rough stuff. And he was boxing with what was, I think, the top 10 Southeast USA heavyweights. That was his sparring partner. And the guy said to him, you're getting pretty good. Why don't you compete? He goes, I'm 38. It's the wrong time to get in boxing. Very smart move. And so he just said you had to change it. And running for him, because he had hip injuries, was out. So he just did power walking every morning. Get out, do power walking, lifted weights, and dieted and stayed leaner than the back and tossing a few beers back and stuff like that. And so he said that every 5 years you have to look at your training and repeat it what Dan said. It doesn't mean you could be living on a McDonald's and win a UFC title. And a lot of them are. That's not an unusual thing because there's less an effect on your body at the time. But after a couple decades of such behavior, you're not going to recover as fast. And it warrants you to follow your nutrition more carefully as you age. Okay. So every 5 years, you look back and say, I wasn't stretching enough. Okay. Stretching, that goes in every day. Okay. I'm not doing enough cardio. I don't want to run. Okay. Get an exercise bike or get a rowing machine. Best possible scenario. Get a rowing machine. So you start adjusting those things. Like you'd say, I have a bad wrist. Okay, wrist warm up every day. Get the stick and warm it up every day. And you're going to have problems. You're going to get x-rays and you're going to feedback and you shouldn't be doing this. And you do what you can and deal with it. And there's plenty of guys in knee replacement. So why guys burn out is they have a lot of enthusiasm and very little brains. Why people last. Dan DeSantis is 89. Put a video up on him on my Facebook page of doing some entries. He's 89. He still trains Cambodian kickboxing, and teaches everything, Southeast Asian martial arts. And he's a 5th degree in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He started at 70, took nothing but privates with Higan Machado, because he says, I have a bad back. They said, we'll fix that. So all of them worked with yoga, stretching. We'll work you in this position until he said, whatever it was in Jiu-Jitsu, it disappeared. There was no point of therapy. He does his yoga. He does kettlebell work. Not that that's magic, but it's portable. Doesn't have to go to the gym down the street, leave a few kettlebells in the corner, and he works it out. And he continues to train martial arts. And I think he walks every morning. The guy takes on Joel. I don't know Joel personally. When they go on do seminars, they get up every morning. He goes, I can't walk 45 minutes. That's the time to pack it in. He'll be doing stuff at his house maybe, and exercising. But he's 89. My teacher in CLOT, Harold Connick, is I think 88 or 89. As far as I know, he trains every day still, and he's an amazing human. Maybe I say he's a role model for me. He's a master flamenco guitarist, master drummer. He's a PhD in social psychology. He's a master hypnotherapist. He taught school on 4 continents. Was a boxer, black belt in Kempo, and he's a Maha Guru in Mustika Kuitong Silat.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, I've been over very close to him, and amazing man. But that's a role model. That's a man, as far as I'm concerned. You could say, I do this, I do that, and that's great. I invented AI, good. I really don't care. It's all good stuff. I'm knocking it, but that's just not my thing. But that's a role model for me. Mm-hmm. And I tend to gravitate towards role models like that. And to this day, at my age, I look, okay, he's got 20 on me. I remember the first time we met at a workshop, we're doing hubud. Well, this guy does hubud, but in Mustika, you used a parong in a reverse grip. So the edge would be out, the blade, and hidden. It's an obscure. Walk up with the blade hidden. You jab the guy. Cut him. Mm-hmm. There's some things you do. But when he was doing hubud, it turned the bone edge, the ulna, just banged me. So I'm like, man, I'm getting killed here. We're doing hubud. What do you do? Because I teach. I was teaching at the university. I do hypnosis. But the martial arts. So we started talking, and that's how I met. This is back in the late 80s. I met him. So I've known him that long. And that's longevity. He gets up. He did boxing. He tells us boxing training, has weights, has leg weights he works. He has a heavy bag. He does a lot of open hand techniques on the heavy bag too. He does a lot of meditation. He's a shaman in his religion.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. So he's an amazing human being. And so that you're going to set the scale for yourself, set it high. You don't have to be famous. It could be anyone. It could be a scholar. It could be a boat builder. It could be anyone. But set the bar high and aspire a bit and go back to the things. Every 5 years, look at your training, okay? realize your athletic period is probably from 20 to maybe 35, that period. After the heavyweights last a little longer because it's not about speed and head movement. It's more about banging and, they don't use as much movement and so forth. So they'd Daniel Cormier is a good example, someone to last a little bit longer and stuff. In the heavyweights, Randy Couture as a heavyweight lasted to 47. Yoel Romero was 49, still fighting. And he's just a freak athlete too. Take into account that. I just heard about Randy Couture the other day he had a heart attack. He probably had some really high LDL levels throughout his athletic career, despite his conditioning. I'm just guessing this. So he was getting a heart attack. So he drove himself to the hospital.
I saw
got
that.
treated. They probably put him on like a heavy statin and something else. The next day he showed up to work out. It's because he's Randy Couture. But the longevity of training, you could always do something. You could do something in a wheelchair. And in terms of your life, it increases the quality of your life and your health span. So that's the point there. And then martial arts, or it could be golfing. You want to still go out on the golf course and walk? Okay, you're going to have steady legs. Got to work on my legs. You're going to use a cart, but you still got to get up and walk up the greens and the hills, and you got to get up early to meet your buddies. Not a bad thing. It's not the NFL. It's a different thing. They're not comparable.
So what the buzzword discipline, everything's about the discipline, right? Do you think modern fitness culture misunderstands discipline?
Yeah, I've had friends say this because they think discipline is getting yelled at and hard work. Discipline is brushing your teeth every day. Discipline is using a seatbelt. Every time you get in your car, you put on your seatbelt. I know people to this day I don't like them. I'm like, have you ever seen a car accident?
Yeah.
Do I have to explain physics to you? Most people, I've noticed this, and I say this a lot lately, is I was an average student. That's a matter of record, very average student. And yet I get people, I went to Rutgers, I went to here. I'm like, really? Wow, that's impressive. I got a degree in this. I'm a president of a company. I'm a CEO. Really? That's really impressive. They flunked middle school. They were out in the parking lot smoking weed or something. They literally flunked physics. They're things based on belief and not evidence. So when you get down to discipline, they think like it's being in the Marines and being yelled at by the drill sergeant. That's their mental picture of what discipline is. Or a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie where they got ropes on your legs pulling you into splits and letting you sleep there overnight. That's their idea of what discipline is. And discipline is consistency. It's doing what you have to despite. And I developed that early. I wanted these goals. I was not a good athlete. I wrestled a bit and I got into martial arts. I was going to do track. And I remember I strained a back muscle. I said, I'll put off track. So I was lifting weights and I kept little records of what I was doing, what I was lifting, what I weighed. And I was going through a growth spurt too. And so I was gaining muscle weight at the height and so forth. And I'm like, wow, I could do this by myself. It's on paper. I'm getting improvement. How powerful a tool is this? And I was 1972, 71, 72, 72. And it's lasted me all this time in terms of that, like brushing your teeth. What's the byproduct of not brushing your teeth? Teeth fall out, or flossing, or something like this, or working, or paying, whatever. There's downsides. And what people do is rather than saying, yes, I need to make changes, go home with a piece of paper or type on a laptop, make some ideas, check them off every day. Here's my calendar. Here's my checklist. Okay. It's like, this is all the stuff I put in a newsletter yesterday. I went through a checklist for every day. I do that. I have another one over here with what I eat and how I work out, all the calories, what I weigh every morning. It's just a habit. I've been doing this for years. Do you have to be as obsessed as I am? No. But what are your goals? Don't rationalize bad behavior. That's my saying. Careers and industries have been destroyed by this. Show business is destroyed by this. You hear, look at Charlie Sheen. Lucky he's not dead.
Yeah.
But Colin Farrell was a real big partier when he did Miami Vice down here back in 96. I heard then he was partying. I love that movie. I've watched it a bunch of times. It was after the TV series. Yeah. And, But I knew then, guys were saying, yeah, he's hit pretty hard. Then he was on a TV show in England recently, and he said, I went to rehab. But he was, 2 packs of cigarettes, and he was getting home from drinking all night at 5. And just as he crawled into bed, there was a knock at the door saying, it's your car. They want to take you to the set. That's okay. But what people would say, oh, he's just a young man playing around. They're rationalizing bad behavior. When someone's a thief, saying, yeah, he steals things, but it's just small stuff. Rationalizing bad behavior. What abused women do. He didn't meet it. He had a bad day. He lost his job. So what? He hit
He's
you?
really a nice guy.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Hanging on him. The guy beat the crap out of her. They rationalize bad behavior. So what I find in doing what I do, monthly or whatever, is I look for that behavior. I look for people pulling the victim status, like, well, this happened to me and that happened to me, and therefore you could say, okay, I'm starting off nodding at the starting line. I'm behind the starting line. Well, I agree with that. Like I wasn't a gifted athlete, geez, but I stuck with it, and the turtle and the hare. Mm-hmm. You just stick with it is one thing, and that's where discipline comes in, of just showing up. Don't make any excuses. Look, okay, there's something flawed here. Like my foot hurt me when I ran. What was that? Look at the shoe. My shoe's worn out. I need new shoes. That's a problem-solving thing. Get good at problem-solving. Don't get good at bitching or complaining and stuff like that. And if you're blaming other people, you'll never solve the problem because you're empowering them. You have to blame yourself. What's Jocko Willink's thing? Whose fault is it? My fault, right?
Extreme ownership.
Extreme ownership, right. We both know it. And so that's the point is if you own it, you control it. But if you don't, then everybody else has the power. So I've seen this, and I formulated this from hearing a couple of people speak, but it's when men and women have weight problems. And I deal with this a lot. They have the weight problems. So, okay, we'll fix this immediately. And okay, here's the macronutrients, here's the amount of calories. I'm not going to tell you, generally speaking, eat the lean proteins, eat the lean dairy products, lots of fruits and vegetables, certain amount of grains, monounsaturated fats. That's about it. And the guy will pat his stomach, especially if I'm out socializing, which I don't do much. They'll pat their stomach but say, Tom, you don't understand, because of course I'm stupid. I love to eat. I love food. I said, I love to eat and I love food too, but I don't medicate with it. The difference between them and me is they're medicating with food. It's the second cheapest antidepressant. Cheapest is exercise. They say, oh, where do you go to the gym? I could go anywhere. Gym's good. Powerlifting gym, CrossFit. I don't care what type of gym. It's CrossFit gym. It's this LA Fitness. You're taking Pilates. You're doing jiu-jitsu. All good. I could train in my house. I could train in a garage. Do you ever see the guys come out of prison? You've known a few guys.
Oh, yeah.
Jacked.
Yes.
Where'd you train? In the yard and in the cell. They went out to yard, did this, did that, went in the cell, mark it off on the wall, do 1,000 push-ups. And, okay. And then I've known the guys. Okay. So that's discipline. They need the armor. Walk around with armor. You don't want to walk around being the portly guy. Get stabbed a lot, amongst other things.
Yeah.
So you know exactly what I'm talking about. So the main thing is about discipline is don't rationalize it because it's a deflection. Don't make a joke about it. Yeah, ha, ha, ha. Yeah, this is expensive. Ha, ha, ha. Pat their belly. They make jokes about it. You get people go through their whole life. They're funny people because they're practiced. But they joke about everything. No matter where, hey, where are you going? They got a joke. You got to do this tomorrow. They got a joke. Well, they've deflected responsibility in their life. Not that they don't do responsibility. They've deflected it their whole life by humor. They're using it as a shield to slow down, like a filter, to give them a gap. Okay? And people do the same thing. Like I said, wife beaters, the beaten spouses and so forth. And that can go psychologically and go both ways. Well, he gets mad. He gets sometimes he drinks too much. We've got a problem there. We rationalize it too often. And I've been in those situations where they say, oh, they're okay. They just had too many. I'm like, well, how are they going to get home? Okay, let me drive them home. I don't want them dying. But that gets back to the question of discipline. Whose fault is it? You going to Uber home? Okay, good. That's your job. Go out, get drunk, and Uber home. That sounds a tremendous weekend there. It's a real growth act. But so
it makes sense.
Yeah, it's just a matter of responsibility. You can still do these things. I mean, guys gonna take his wife out and have a nice Italian meal and a glass of wine. It's a beautiful thing and so forth. But the fact is, can you eat? Can you enjoy birthday parties? Yeah, I sure do. But you have to be in control of the situation, and you have to take responsibility for it. Like we were saying earlier, you know about it. I know about it. You take responsibility for it.
What I took out of that right out the gate was, and this is me paraphrasing, okay, but discipline sounds sexy. But if we took the word out and just put in consistency, it doesn't sound as sexy. Consistency sounds like I'm somebody with a pocket protector and my nerd glasses or whatever
Yeah,
that is. But discipline is like, oh, he must be. It's almost like the fantasy, martial fantasy part. He's disciplined. But if we took it out, we said consistency,
yeah,
then that means every day building a
yeah,
habit.
yeah, yeah. Consistency sounds tremendously boring.
Yes.
But if you ask anyone in finance, you hear about someone winning a lotto because it's a rare occurrence, 1 in a million. But a guy consistently investing over his career and ends up with a really nice goose egg, or not a goose egg, but an egg when he retires.
Mm-hmm.
You don't hear about that guy. A guy worked X amount of years for a company and has a nice pension. You don't hear about that guy, but he's put it into consistency. You show up and work on time every day. Consistency. Get on a scale once a week, which I require of clients, and measure their waistline consistently. I remember we had a client who's a very good martial artist. He's in martial arts all his life too. Really good dude. And we just took his weight and his waist measurement and would start our correspondence every week coaching him and put waist and weight and watch them go down at a list. And it went down consistently. And we went from 240 and change down to 182, I think.
Outstanding.
And it was, over a long period of time and do a workout. And it's not like, oh, Tom made me do this. No, like I said, well, okay, I'm doing this, but I've got damaged toes from judo. Okay, well, then we'll do this instead. That's what coaching is. Coaching is small deviations in behavior. I'll use this example, and I heard it before, is you don't go to a Mike Tyson and say, okay, this round, I want you to just throw the jab, flick the jab like Ali and dance. Change my whole game? Are you crazy? But that's what people think. Well, here's a new workout. But you started me on a new workout last week. Yeah, but here's a different one. Sounds like CrossFit. Ha. But doesn't make much sense. But it's small deviations in behavior. Like, okay, we have you doing curls. Do dumbbell curls. Well, I got a barbell. Can I use that? Yeah, sure. Small deviation of behavior. It snowed that day, so I got on my exercise bike and I did 45 minutes. Is that okay? Yeah, that's okay. So it's not terribly sexy. Some people get into the idea is like, well, what's Tom telling me? He's looking at my weight. We're talking about that. Like, okay, you went to a party. Foods are going to be higher in carbs and sodium. You're going to retain a little bit of water. So your goal is 155. That's you're 5 feet 7 inches tall. It's 155. So you're like 168. You bounced up to 170. Okay, we'll see how you are next week. And the next week they're down a pound plus the water and fluids they had from the party. That's just experience. We know it occurs chemically, but what I'm saying, that's experience of watching people do that. It's not terribly sexy, but when you stick with people and just tweak it a little bit, the goal isn't the end point. The goal is doing it daily. Mm-hmm. You're training them to do it daily. And that's the thing. It's the process, not the goal. Focus on the process. How's my workout going to be today? Do I have enough time? Am I going to have to do it late? Okay, I'm feeling a little sore. I'm a little beat up. Do I do it, but back off a little? What we'd call auto-regulation, which is a really hard skill for anyone, even myself, because as I've said to other people, it's the old saying is you take a day off, your enemy's training harder.
Yeah.
So you're up at night staring at the ceiling. So taking a day off, it's the hardest thing if you like training. Taking a day off, like, oh, I'm going to be fat tomorrow. I don't mean anorexia. You just think, oh, I need to burn some calories. And You say you need it some days. You come home, you go to Europe, and you come back, it's different time change. You've eaten crappy food over there, and you come over, and like Jocko Willink, I got up the next morning and I trained. Yeah, okay, great. Jocko, you're leading the way. I get that. Sleep in the next day, then start training and get back to it. They asked him, in fact, Jocko, he went to a UFC, and they showed him ringside. It was a UFC, and they were out with the guys late. And he's not drinking, but they were out late. Well, he always gets up at 4:30 to train. They go, what time did you get up the next day? It was a podcast he was on. Did you get up at 4:30? He goes, no, I slept in because we were out late. I slept into like 8 or 9, and that afternoon I did training. That's common sense. That's auto-regulation. But some people would quit it, then they'd get back, and then, all the stuff to catch up on, they wouldn't train for a week. Like, I've been off training. And it's the daily process. It's like when you see people and you say, how you been? They say, I put on 20 pounds. I admitted to the gym. I'm like, the gym didn't take 20 pounds or put it on you. That's impossible. You don't burn that many calories exercising. Mm-hmm. You burn roughly 100 calories per mile walking or running, roughly 100 calories. A pound of fat is 3,500 calories. So that's 35 miles. Now, when you run a marathon, do you come in much less? Yeah, fluid loss, glycogen loss, everything. You probably, if I'm going to use a potty word here, you're going to shit your pants. That happens during long runs. That's not uncommon, or you might piss your pants. So you're losing fluids. So you were like 150 when you started the marathon. You're 141 at the end of the marathon. Okay, with a good pizza, some waters or whatever you're going to have to drink, dark beer or whatever, you're going to be back to weight real soon. Okay, but the amount of fat you lost, it would take 35 miles. People go, oh my God, I'll never lose a fat. Of course you will. Cut 250 calories out of your daily diet. Walk for 2.5 miles, which would be roughly, and that's just perfect on paper numbers. Mm-hmm. It doesn't occur exactly that way.
Sure.
You lose heat through your skin. You have bowel movements. Metabolically, different things happen. But on math, so that's 500 calories a day. 1 week, that's a pound of fat. For a moderate size, an average woman's actually, the average size for a woman now is like 160, like 5'5", I think. It's pathetic. In my age group, it's really bad. And I'm saying these are national averages.
Sure.
And they can go to 30% fat or 31% before being termed obese. Men at 30% are obese. Women are allowed to have more fat consistently. But a pound of fat a week for a moderate-sized woman, it's a good, healthy loss. Usually it's a half a pound, but like if they've got some weight on them in the beginning, that's a pretty healthy loss. And for a big guy, you get a guy 250 pounds, yeah, they can knock off the weight fast. Anybody who's large and muscular is a fat-burning machine. Anyone who's obese, we're talking 300 pounds, they lose almost all fat in the beginning. Whereas as the leaner you get, your skin gets real thin, you have to fight constantly losing muscle. There's some things you can adjust, then you pause and you adjust again, like you're going to get a photo shoot or modeling or something like that, or an event or something like this. There's some games you can play. The best game is bodybuilding drugs, of course. But short of that, there's some dietary games you can play to maintain the lean body mass and lose the fat, particularly when you get very lean. But when you've got enough fat on, you're termed obese. I think it's 31 or 32 for women, over 30% for men. You're losing mostly fat. When you see pounds off the scale at that time, you're on a good diet. It's mainly fat. It's pretty clear. It's pretty easy. It takes a lot of work to stay 300 pounds, believe it or not.
That makes sense.
Unless you're like in bed, you're one of these guys, 600 pounders in bed, you're not doing a whole lot. Mm-hmm. But then you see them come in with, bags of French fries for them. But what I'm saying is they're not burning a hell of a lot of calories doing that. It's a terrible place to be. But they're not burning. Even Richard Simmons used to get in the end, just make them wave their arms to music and dance around. They were burning way more calories. That's how severe. That's the difference of something that occurring. But for like the difference, even metabolically, you get a 225-pound guy who's obese. He should weigh 170. And you get a 225-pound football player who's just jacked to the gills. When they sleep, it's not going to be that much different metabolically. People think, oh, muscle burns more than fat. When they sleep, it's not going to be that much. Pound of fat and a pound of muscle aren't that far off. We used to believe it was different, but it's a couple calories off per pound. But the 225-pound football player can do 2-a-days. 225-pound guy who's 60 pounds overweight walks around a block, he's out of breath, his legs hurt, and the whole thing. He has to go in. It's good. It's a good thing. But he can't work like the football player. Football player, man, I dropped 7 pounds, 6 of it water, and I think I burned 1,000 out there on the field today. It's conceivable. And I've even had clients that said, 1 hour workout we did with kettlebells, a woman. She's a very fit woman, by the way. And she kept listing it. She goes, how many calories do you think we burned in this workout? Take her through a workout. I'd show the movement, a timer, show the next one, timer, boom, boom, boom. Whole thing. Start with a warm-up and with a stretch at the end. 1 hour. Right now, 1 hour in a button. I said, 150, 200 calories? You're kidding me. But an hour of vigorous weight, she said, an hour of vigorous weight training, it says right here is 1,000 calories. I said, ma'am, that's not an hour of vigorous weight training. You know what I'm saying? That's where you go back to someone who's a professional athlete and you're just burying that guy like an Olympic weightlifter. And they take lots of rest. But if you see someone at the highest level performing and maybe doing aerobics too to keep their in the weight class and so forth, they could burn that. Maybe like NFL 2-a-days preseason, they're burning some calories or something, or hockey or basketball, something like that. So, but not the average humans. It's so simple.
Yeah. Common sense isn't so common, right?
No.
Right. I mean,
No,
and
I agree.
information is always on the move and always changing, and staying up to date on things is part of so much success in whatever endeavor. If someone wanted to start training at the age of 50 today,
Yeah.
what would you prioritize for them, or what would be your first suggestion?
Well, first thing you'd find out they're medical. You don't want to make sure they're not going to check out on you. Like
Mhm.
when you're doing wind sprints and they have a stroke, that would be first in line. But generally speaking, which medical condition, and then most people have a few things by then. The body wears out. It sucks, but the body wears out. And so what is it? Okay, I had a knee, a knee issue. Okay, fine. Or I have a chip in my back, but it doesn't bother me. Okay. You look at those things. The blood pressure is good. Their blood fats are good. You look at those things, and you look at the components. The primary components are cardiovascular. We used to call flexibility, or we say mobility, not just dropping into splits, but being able to do like a high kick, like ability to move your arms and shoulders through a full range of motion. So we'd say cardiovascular, mobility, and muscular strength. And instantly, all the weightlifters and then all the runners get into, well, what's better? False dichotomy. What's better, lifting weights or cardio? Well, in terms of your health, cardiovascular fitness was going to have a very profound effect, because heart disease is probably number one, right up there with cancer and heart disease. But in terms of quality of life and not aging, strength training has to be there. Loss of lean body mass. It's called age-related sarcopenia is big. Why do people look different as they age? Because they lose muscle. Hormonally, things happen slowly for men past the age of 40 into their 50s. Andropause, as the reduction of male testosterone levels, occurs. So you see men a little more hunched. You see a little more weight, like in their different parts of the abdominal region and their chest.
Mhm.
And you see a loss of muscle mass, like arms, shoulders, legs, things like that, an increase in body fat. And they essentially become very masculine looking women. Excuse me, it's true. Women, it occurs rather rapidly in menopause. So you're talking this 50 thing again. So around 50, for a lot of women, sometimes it could, back 60 years ago, was rather severe. The term change of life, that's what I heard when I was a kid. Women went through the change of life, and they'd rapidly lose their hormonal. So the ratio dropped, and estrogen dropped so much, their skin would go south, and that would be in rough shape. And proportionally, they don't have a lot of testosterone, but if it's down here and their estrogen used to be up here, it goes down here, now it's parity. So what do women do? They get thicker in the middle. like men do.
Mm-hmm.
So they get a thicker middle. So instead of having curvaceous to attract men for procreation, as the anthropology would dictate, they can no longer procreate. So that's past. That doesn't mean they're worthless. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that's
No, that's not what
anthropology.
I mean. That's not what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
You're
So
explaining it well.
50, you
Yeah.
really need to look at, okay, your LDLs are like 100. Okay, that's good. And your triglycerides are good. You're not on insulin. Maybe your blood pressure is a little bit bumped up. They might give you something mild for that. You're maybe a little overweight. So if we corrected that, things would get even better for you, which is the good part.
Mm-hmm.
And you said the injuries, but there's a hormonal thing too. That doesn't mean, but say, does your doctor check for hormones? Oh, I guess he does. Does he or doesn't he? And there's a number of hormone tests, but it's called the male hormone panel and female hormone panel. Around 50, that's probably something they should take. And for men are all usually pretty big in it. If they could take HRT, hormone replacement therapy, or TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, they're like, hey, I'm going to feel young again. I'm going to get bigger muscles and be horny. Ooh, where's the downsides? Give me a lot of that stuff, right? Whereas I've had women, I'm very familiar with women doing it and feeling fantastic for the rest of their life. Some women can't because they've had cancers which are hormonally based cancers. Certain breast cancers are non-hormonally based. Some are hormonally based, and they can't use any hormones. It would be very complex to use those things. But for women doing this, easing their way through menopause, which could be very severe,
Yeah.
with hot flashes and things like that, easing their way through that with hormones properly used. And back in the 50s and 60s, they gave it to you by the bucket, and all types of wild things happen. Now it's so refined to blood levels. It's very specific. But you hear the term, and I've heard it from women, that, oh, I don't like unnatural, I only want natural things in my body. I'm like, if you didn't have hormones, you'd die. Hormones are totally natural. All you're doing is bringing yourself back to the hormone levels of, say, age 30 or 35, when you were optimal.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're doing. And so that would, an age 50 client, you'd mention it. Whether they do it or not is up to them. I've had clients who've done it, felt fantastic. I had one who was like living with depression, walking around like, I function, I go to work, I love my kids, love my wife, doing this, doing that. Started going on HRT, like, dear God, is the sky blue? You're out for a hike. That sky is so damn blue. I feel so good. I wake up ready every day. Completely different human being, because there's androgen or male hormone receptors in the brain. Depression's part of it. Men could get depressed during that period. Women can get depressed during that period. So for the 50 age person, first thing would be the physical. Where are they at? They want to go on HRT. I don't say go on it. Go to your doctor and ask about it. Go to a physician. First, how my wrist hurts me. Go to a physician. Then, they say they're sore. Okay, take this day off. I'm not a doctor. Go to a physician. That's what your doctors are there for. Okay, so that'd be the first thing. Getting them into that. What are you doing now? Nothing. Okay, a little more complex. Start them at the very end and say, okay, we're going to get you on a running program. No, you're not. You never ran. They're going to hurt themselves. Let's get your steps up. Get a step counter on your phone. Where are you at? Oh, I got 200 steps yesterday. Really? Okay, we got some problems. And it's not magical 10,000. They said 7,000 is optimal. 10,000 comes from a Japanese game, I guess. There used to be a thing, Japanese game. You got 10,000, you get all the points.
Wow.
It's an anecdote, but I heard that, and it seems conceivable. But optimally, it's 7,000 and up, and then you probably peak. And I've had clients go to Europe. The cities are made for walking. They get 21,000 steps. I've had clients with 21,000 steps. They had dogs. They walk the older dogs first. They walk the younger dogs later, and they were just a hyper person. And they get 20,000. That wouldn't be unusual. Okay, I got an ex-military guy. He's doing 12,000 a day, easy. Okay, so it depends on your lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And some of these people live where there's snow and things like that. They don't have good weather year round. So we look at their steps. We look at how obese or over fat they are. That's a big thing. We get that diet dialed in. Then strength part is pretty easy. That's just like you got to push, you got to pull, you got to squat, you got to hinge, get some type of core movement. Okay, that's it. And there's a billion variables on those. Mm-hmm. What hurts them? What are they capable of? Maybe they're not strong enough for what you're suggesting. Like, okay, give me 5 push-ups. I can't even do 1 push-up. Okay, We'll start on your knees. We'll do one that way. And then 2 days, we'll do two. That's how you train people. It's like work, like learning martial arts. There's parts of it that are exciting, that you're getting change. But there's parts that are very task-like and boring. The discipline part is boring. That's why you focus on the process. When you see a change week to week in your weight and so forth, people feedback and they get results. They like it. Mm-hmm. And usually I will tell you that the risk of stroking out or dying doesn't occur to some people. They say, oh, it's going to be a bad weekend, so it's going to be a bad weigh-in. Oh, okay, you're going to a party? Okay, yeah. Oh, well, no one's going to tell me not to eat, 7 buckets of pulled pork and 84 biscuits with gravy. They're prone to excess, which that's a psychological issue, which I wouldn't talk about anyways to them. I'd say maybe you need some help. But if that's a consistent thing, they've been doing this all their life, they're dealing with other problems other than knowing how to eat or calling foods good and bad. That's moralizing food. You're starving to death, jelly beans are a good food. You're trapped in a place, all I can eat is jelly beans, they'll keep you alive. It's a good food, okay? So you don't moralize food, you don't moralize exercise. You don't say, you don't do this exercise. They say, well, we're doing a dance routine with the company I work for, and we all have to do a sit-up and sing. Guess you're doing sit-ups. Mm-hmm. You may think they're bad for your back, but you got to do them. And I've seen that in exercise, in dance, in show business. Like, isn't that hard on their back? It's part of the routine. So they have to develop the stability and strength to do that. So you can't moralize exercise, you can't moralize food. It gets down to math. Eat too much, you're over fat. Eat too little, you're underweight. You don't eat enough protein, you won't thrive and be muscular. Okay? And I don't care about keto, plant-based, vegan, blood type diets, all this baloney. They work because either they instill better eating habits or they reduce the amount of calories you're consuming. Calories are a matter of math. If you can do math, you can lose body fat. So getting back to the 50-year-old, dial in their diet. Make sure they're getting to their doctors and getting that part checked. Get them to do proper strength work 2 to 3 times per week and make it progressive. It isn't 5 push-ups a day the rest of your life. It's 5 push-ups, then it's 6 push-ups, then it's 7 push-ups. Moving on that way. And then every so often, if it's getting stale, they're doing it, you find that their numbers aren't going up, you adjust slightly. Okay? You adjust, you go from like a body weight squat, parallel squat to like lunges. Same thing, basically. It's a single leg squat. You adjust something like that. And I'm saying at the most basic level. They have a gym, their exercise class or whatever. That's what you do with them. Then you look for progression. If they're doing the same thing all the time, they won't see any change. They should be getting leaner. Women, it'll be hips and waist. Men will be waist and their weight. We'll get to the optimal range for their weight. And it's usually lower than you think, certainly lower than they think. That doesn't mean you starve them out. But if you go down to like, oh, this guy's 250, 180 would probably be good. You get down to 180, you still see a lot of fat on him. He's way off better. He could stay that way the rest of his life and be way better off. But if he's saying, aesthetically, I'm going to,
the beach.
Malibu. Yeah, I'm going to Malibu this summer, and I'm going to be with a bunch of people, and I've been out of shape. Yeah, okay, we'll take it further. Woman says, I want to wear a bikini or something. Okay, we can take it further. That's fine. Or they wanted to fit into something, or like a uniform, or go to their prom, their high school reunions or something like that. You could push it, but peak strength means peak. Peak condition is peak. Means there's some level that you're at normally, and you move it like a fighter. You're a fighter. What do you fight at? 175. What are you walking around at? 235. You hear it all the time in UFC interviews. Oh, he walks around at 235. Young guy, he's just overdoing it. Oh, I can get back in shape. Yeah, that day may not come. We all know about cutting, don't we?
Yeah.
That day's not going to happen sometime. Mm-hmm. And you see the guys passing out now. Water loss. Sure. They're underneath the blankets backstage. They're sweating it out. They're scraping the sweat off of them. And you and I are in that game. Most people aren't. But you know what I'm talking about. And then why do that? Why not stay in moderate shape or fight more frequently or at least compete? Some guys go off and compete in jiu-jitsu in the off time. And then when they go to fight UFC again or whatever, they're closer in condition. which is probably pretty smart. So,
Yeah. You
yeah.
do a lot of work with people virtually, Tom, in your business.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that.
People always wonder how I do it, and people ask me, "Well, fitness consultant, what's that?" I said, "Well, I train people through with a laptop," and they say, "Oh, do you do classes?" And I'm like, "Yeah." First thing I do is get up in the morning, and instead of drinking coffee and looking at Instagram, I come out and I do a workout class. I don't do that. No, I exactly as I told you. I look at where they've been. I look at the evidence they present me: conditioning, injuries, lifestyle, health, and goals. What do I want to get back? I want to run a marathon this year. Okay. What are your goals? I want to look at it. I want to wear a bathing suit. I don't want to step out of the shower and be disgusted. These are all good goals. Okay, and then we work that out. Then I communicate through email. They send me pictures, side, front, back, and measurements, and I work out where the percentage of body fat is, amount of calories I want them to eat, and the workouts I want to do. And we correspond week to week. I need an example if they're very naive about exercise. Some people aren't, some people are. YouTube's got every exercise on the planet. I don't need to film it. I really don't. I could, but I really don't. There's excellent videos on almost everything, and I'm not going to make some exotic thing up. You got to do this certain exercise, only I invented. That's BS. So I work with them like that. So when I'm like at a party, like as if I walk into cocktail parties looking at me, and people say, "Oh, what do you do?" I said, "Well, I'm a fitness consultant." And they said, "Well, how do you do that?" I said, "Well, what I do is people email me, and I tell them to do push-ups, then they pay me." and they go, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, that's pretty close to it, but it's a little more sophisticated to that, and I could be casual and relaxed about it because it's not like I'm passing the bar exam." The physiology I read daily. I was on PubMed an hour ago, and keep up with physiologists and physicians and other trainers and compare notes and ask questions. I'm the most curious human alive, so I always ask questions. And so I deal with them. I'm always there. So if they're out, they say, I've gotten this once in a while. Like, I'm shopping. Should I buy A or B? And there's not a bad answer, unless they're going to need a bucket of French fries with a gallon of vodka. I wouldn't recommend that. I know some people who could do that. I say, "Hey, I'm going out to eat." Like, an example, they were going to, where's that Disney World or the Ozarks? What is that place?
Six Flags or something like that?
No, what's the one? It's like, whatever.
Dollywood?
Yeah, something like that. Say they're going to Dollywood. And I'm worried about the food there. I said, "What are you going to do in the evenings with the family?" So, "Well, we're going to go out to a decent restaurant in the evening." "Okay, good. I got a little trick. You don't have to do it, but I got a little trick. You go up and the kids are eating pancakes, and you order pancakes and a 15-egg omelet or something. Like, here's what you do. Bring a bag of protein bars, like 20 grams of protein, around 200 calories, 180 if you could find it. Have a protein bar and coffee in the morning. Caffeine is going to kill your appetite. Any amphetamine will, as we well know. Take amphetamines, they kill your appetite. So coffee and a protein bar. You got 20 grams of protein, and you get a little bit of some carbs too. Okay. Walk around the amusement park. Lunchtime comes. Grab another Starbucks. Grab a protein bar. A little bit of fiber in some of them. Have your coffee. Kill your appetite. Now you're living on protein and carbs, minimal amount of fat. Once again, you get a little boost from the caffeine. At night, go to dinner. Going to go to Ponderosa Steakhouse or wherever steakhouse, Dollywood Steakhouse. Have a lean sirloin, have a couple chicken breasts, have half a pound of salmon, Chilean sea bass, have a nice tossed salad, a little vinaigrette. Okay, want to have a glass of wine with your wife while the kids are eating at the other table? Fine. Come back and you'll be 3 to 5 pounds lighter, and it works every time. Yeah, that
makes sense. Yeah.
But they asked me, "Well, I'm going away. What keeps me from eating cookies and pretzels and cotton candy?" And like, they do it. They feel better too, because who wants to eat big meals before you're walking around an amusement park or at Yellowstone or, wherever, Disney? You want to sit down at a certain point, but you kind of want to go back and get a shower and have a good meal, and you're exhausted and you go to sleep. But you wake up, there's things to do on vacation, particularly when you get on the road. And when I travel, at one point I was traveling back. I was born in Pittsburgh, as I mentioned. I was driving from Fort Lauderdale to Pittsburgh a lot when my father was elderly. and I bring apples, almonds, and protein bars, and it's stop for Starbucks. That was it. Grab some almonds, chew them up, eat an apple, eat a protein bar, all the way up. I drive straight through 22 hours.
Mm-hmm.
It was just my habit. I didn't want to stop anywhere. And that worked. And say this individual worked for me, but it's a simple process. You don't want to eat 6 protein bars. You're going to be bloated up. It's just feel terrible. You have one. Being a little hungry. No one died from it. Adults don't die. The old thing of telling kids, you're going to bed without your dinner. It's not one of the dumbest things ever said by humans. They're growing. Their brains are developing. Their bones are developing. The kids need food. What they should do is tell adults, oh, you were a jerk today. You're going to bed without your dinner. Because adults can tolerate it. Skipping a meal won't kill people. I don't recommend intermittent fasting. It's just a convenience thing. If you don't want to eat breakfast or don't want to eat lunch, or you want to eat big breakfast, moderate lunch, tiny dinner, that's all fine. It's just the amount of calories you get in a day. You're not getting autophagy of your cells. You're getting more from exercise. People say, oh, it's the autophagy. Okay, good. Explain it on a blackboard over there. They're not doing anything magic to make themselves younger. If they like training on an empty stomach, there is value to that for probably the leanest people to have caffeine or another stimulant and do aerobics on an empty stomach in the morning. But that would be if you're already lean, and 99.9% of people aren't. Mm-hmm. Men aren't walking around at 10% body fat. It's the guy showing you, say, I was at the gym today. Could you tell me you visually, and you're on a physiology form, what do you think my body fat's at? You say, hey, look, 12 to 13. Yeah, about 4 people. Okay, thanks. That's all I needed to know. Because everything else is an estimate. Skin folds are an estimate. I've taken hundreds of skin folds of people and myself. DEXA scans are so variable, determining a water. The ones you get at home where you hold the scale or it goes through your feet, impedance, are the worst. I had one woman who's in bodybuilding, said she was 4% fat. She's a very beautiful woman, very good bodybuilder, very disciplined, by the way. But she says, oh, my body fat's 4%. She's lean when she's contest, she's 4%. Okay. If it was 4% of fallopian tubes would be linguine. No. The only way to tell body fat, and I said this to someone else, was to, you die, you scrape the body fat off the cadaver and you weigh it. You compare it to the weight of the body. That's actually how they came up with those scales, by measuring body fat. But they're an estimate. If you have a skin fold of, say, your thigh and your side of your waist, like the front of your oblique, the fold there near your oblique, rectus abdominis area, you take a skin fold there and you write it down. And then maybe in 6 weeks, you take it again. And you've taken them a lot, they're close. When they do tests, they actually tattoo you on those spots. So it's the same spot all the time. Yeah. And you measure it and you say, okay, I'm at 10 millimeters and I've gone down to like 7 millimeters. It doesn't matter what percentage of body fat you're at. You're a little bit lower. The scale says you're lower. Your waist measurement says you're lower. And the skin calipers say you're lower. Okay. And visually, you can look at yourself under the same lighting and say, I look a little leaner. Most people lie to themselves, but your clothes usually don't lie.
Amen.
Clothes don't shrink that much.
No. Tom, you release a lot of information through Substack. Could you let our viewers know where they could find you? And then I will also put some contact info in the description of this episode.
Sure. tomfurman.substack.com and tomfurman.gumroad.com for the ebooks, which I think I've got 5.
Yeah.
I'm trying to add them up. Yeah, I think I got 5. Whatever. And last one, it was Durable Human. And they're all different. There isn't like one's better, one's worse. I look back at old stuff. So some of them I haven't read in years. I have to look back and say, on this 3rd page, I'm like, I haven't read that in 7 years. I have to go back and look at it. But each one has a little bit different theme. I had the early bodyweight program, Armor of War. I had a Train for Life program, which combined Armor of War with a stretching method and some other mobility tricks I threw in there. That's a bigger one. Seasons of Temper was, I wrote a series of articles on medium.com, and they have a paywall. So you'd read one article for free, and I had them all for free. Read one article free, go to the next article and say, would like you to join Medium. Well, people would stop reading them. So what I did was I collected all the articles and I put them in a book, Seasons of Temper. It's got like 32 chapters. There's a lot of information in that. There's a lot of in workouts. There's ways of thinking. There's ways of comparing and looking at physiology and say, that's why that works. Or, oh, that's why we measure it that way. I have some of that, but there's a lot of workouts in there. And the last one, durable human. What I looked at was what I consider the most durable athletes that aren't necessarily popular. Looked at what they did in training. Then I made it adaptable for someone to do in their garage. So we have different types of training methods of athletes, and we just gel them together. Okay, and they're not killer. It isn't like you could work this at any level. You could work over 50s group with this easily. And in fact, I have some people telling me, oh yeah, I'm doing this. So that's durable human. And I have another one in there I wrote years ago, went to Amazon, but I actually put it up on my site too. It was on mobility training, it was strength training for mobility. And I took an old Kung Fu movie, part of the title. The old Kung Fu movie from 1974 was Bamboo Gods and Iron Men. So I made mine Bamboo Gods, Iron Man, and Rubber Bands. And it was about,
awesome.
It was a real movie. It was about a guy went on his honeymoon in Hong Kong, and he was a boxer, and he had some deaf Chinese guy helping him, and they were attacked by the triads, of course, and he found some magic ointment, and it made him invulnerable. Bamboo Gods and Iron Men. So, but I always remember that time. I thought that was fascinating, but I added the rubber bands because you need a lot of resistance bands. For extreme ranges of motion, sometimes weights aren't easy or advisable, whereas the resistant bands will have a low resistance in extreme positions. So if your arm's way out to the side, you have a dumbbell, it might be, oh, I hurt myself. You ease off on a resistance band, and then you get more contraction. Doesn't make it better, it's just a tool. It's a toolbox. So I have that, and I explain stretching methods and so forth, and we take like 100 pictures for that thing. It was a lot. And so that's one I just put up recently. Yeah.
Excellent. Tom, thank you so much for coming on the show. Happy birthday on Friday.
Yeah.
You are a source of inspiration for so many, and you do your best to help so many people. We thank you for that. And I'm looking forward to a conversation with you later where I can learn a little bit more and, work on being a more durable human myself.
You got it, man.
All right.
You got it. Work with anyone.
All right. This is Jamie Sparling from the FormABLE Podcast with Tom Furman of Tom Furman Fitness. Check him out. Substack, wealth of information, and he can help you get where you want to be. Until next time, stay formable and have a great day, a great week.